Hey, what's going on, guys? Hope y'all been having a good one. Today I'm going to be showing you guys a pretty cool new ChatGPT recipe, but first, check out these pictures from this car meet I went to yesterday. My close friend was the host, and so, I had to show up and support the boy. Y'all know how it is. I meant to get this video up yesterday after I got back, but then, the F1 race was on after I got back, and right after that, I passed out. Y'all know how it is. But anyway, so today I'm going to be making a ChatGPT spaghetti and meatballs recipe. Primarily the meatballs I got from ChatGPT. This was a cool recipe because a lot of people in my family have never been a big fan of most spaghetti and meatballs, as sometimes they have like a bit of an off flavor or something like that. So I wanted to get this recipe for picky eaters that could be a bit more appealing to the masses. So I started out with about a cup of panko breadcrumbs and then a half cup of milk. So as you can see, if you read the recipe, I'm pretty much doubling up on the quantities of the recipe here just to make enough for my entire family. It's a good idea to start out with this just so that the breadcrumbs have a chance to soak up the milk and swell up and soften a bit. This is a big part of what can help keep the meatballs nice and moist. It also helps a lot with the tenderness as well. And then I'm going to be using about 2 pounds of ground beef, a little bit more than that, just because this is some very fatty beef I have here. It's 73/27. Ideally, I would have preferred to have 80/20, but they didn't have that at the store, unfortunately, so I just had to settle for this. Surprise, surprise, Mikey annoying me again when I'm working with some raw meat. This boy loves his meat. What can I say? It's a little bit sus. This is something I'm adding to the recipe, dicing up some serrano peppers. It's not part of the recipe listed by ChatGPT, but it's something my family really enjoys, some serrano peppers, and you don't have to include it if you want, but it's not going to be too spicy after you fry it up. It really does remove a lot of the heat from the peppers. I would recommend you guys give it a shot though with this. It really does add a nice extra layer of flavor and also adds a little bit more greenness, which is kind of nice to see in the meatballs. If you're afraid of the heat, you could go ahead and remove the white parts from the center of the peppers. But like I said, when you fry it up, it really does remove pretty much all of the heat from the peppers. And so I wanted to kind of retain as much as possible. And so I just decided to keep it all in the seeds and all the white stuff on the inside. Also, if you by chance wanted a little bit more heat, you could dice it up a little bit less fine than I'm doing here and just have slightly bigger chunks of the pepper. And that could help retain a little bit more heat from the peppers as well. Once you get that all nice and diced up, then I added some cilantro as opposed to parsley just because we usually eat more cilantro than parsley in our household. And so I like to bunch it up like this and then just finely chop it up. It just makes it a lot easier to get it nice and evenly chopped up and get a nice consistency from the cilantro. Then once you're done with that, you can go ahead and place that to the side for the time being, and then we can come back to making our meatball mix. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and add a little bit of salt, and then from there, go ahead and add a bit of black pepper, and then here I'm adding some garlic powder. This is optional, but I really enjoy it. A little bit of onion powder, a little bit of Italian seasoning, some chili flakes, which I really enjoy. And then we don't really eat Parmesan cheese in our household, and so I just finally shredded up a little mountain of pepper jack cheese. It's probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, types of cheese. I'm just gonna go ahead and add in the serrano peppers and the cilantro. And then before I forget, like I forgot with my cookie recipe, you want to make sure to get the eggs as to act as a binder for the meatballs. So just go ahead and crack 2 eggs in. For whatever reason, these cage-free eggs seem to be a little bit, the shells rather, are a little bit harder to crack without getting any of the shell inside. You can see Mikey trying to get some meat. I had to distract him with the eggshell. He's looking a little bit of the remaining egg white in there. While I'm trying to get that last little bit inside the eggs. I just went and put that down. He was licking it up. Let me know what you guys think about the little kitty cameos. If you guys like it, I'll keep them in. If not, I could go ahead and cut them out. I think I personally enjoy having them in. It's a little bit more fun. This was a little test I gave to Mikey, see if he would be well behaved while I was gone washing my hands. And hey, well, surprisingly enough, he was. Didn't try to lick the beef or nothing. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and start mixing up the ground beef. You can see there's the breadcrumbs at the bottom, all nice and soft. And so just go ahead and just keep on mixing and mixing and mixing. One thing you want to keep in mind is you don't want to be squishing the ground beef together. That can result in some chewiness and some undesirable consistencies. So rather, you kind of want to just be breaking the ground beef while you're trying to mix it up. You just kind of separate it, break it apart, and then that's the best way, in my experience, to get a nice tender consistency with the beef. Had to knock down Mikey there. He was getting a little too close. You guys might be getting a little bit concerned with the cats walking on the counters and stuff while I'm cooking, but if they walk on the counter and I need to use the counter for anything, you could be rest assured I always sanitize it before I do anything on the counter itself. And besides, it's not like I'm cooking for a restaurant or anything like that. It's just me cooking for myself and my siblings and my parents. Now, at this point, I'm just going through it and checking for the consistency, seeing if there's any chunks of ground beef that aren't thoroughly mixed in, just kind of separating it apart, grabbing everything from the bottom, making sure all the breadcrumbs and seasoning and all the greens that I added, making sure everything is well and evenly incorporated. And I just kind of scraped up the sides a little bit just to get anything left over incorporated into the meat. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and start forming the meatballs. You want to make sure you don't form them super tight. I just kind of like to grab a little handful and rotate it in my hand until it's nicely shaped and nicely formed. Again, just make sure not to squeeze it too hard or anything like that. And I'm gonna be making these a little bit bigger than you might want to make them at home, just because they were a little bit fattier, and so I was concerned about them falling apart while frying them. At the end of the day, it wasn't too much of a concern at the end, and so I could have made them about two-thirds of the size and had a few more meatballs than I ended up with here. Let me know what you guys think about these little time lapses where I'm just quickly doing stuff. If you guys enjoy it, if not, if you want me to cut it out, let me know what you guys suggest just so I could go ahead and improve my videos, tailor it to you guys. Me personally, I always like watching these little clips. It's just always a little bit fun just to see it get quickly done. Now, as I'm forming this last meatball, I just go ahead and scrape up all the sides and everything. Just make sure I get everything out of the bowl so I don't let anything go to waste. Now, this is a good rule of thumb for whenever pan frying any type of meat, pretty much. I would say try and get your pan pretty dang hot so you can see little wisps of smoke coming up from the pan as I've got it blasted on high. And then this really wasn't necessary considering how fatty the meatballs were, but I just went and added a little bit of oil just to help with the searing process a little bit. But again, at the end of the day, it wasn't super necessary. Now, when it comes to searing meatballs, I think everybody's a little bit different, but me personally, I like to get a nice hard sear on at least three sides if possible. And so I'll just go ahead and get them all laid down, and then as soon as they get a nice sear on the one side, then I'll go ahead and rotate them all about one third of the way, and then repeat as you will see here. Now, this is what you want to see. You want to see a nice golden brown, nice Maillard reaction. That's gonna add a lot of flavor to the meatballs as well as to the sauce, which I'm gonna go ahead and finish cooking the meatballs with the sauce. You can see I held off on flipping those few just because they didn't quite have a nice hard enough sear yet, so I gave them a little bit of additional time just to get them exactly where I wanted them. It's worth waiting a little bit as opposed to prematurely flipping them, and then you don't quite get the nice texture and browning that you want. And also at this point, you could see even through the sear, you could see a bit of the greens sticking out, adding a bit of color to the meatballs. Which me personally, it's like eating it with you eat it with your eyes first. You know what I mean? And so it's just very nice and satisfying to see that. Now you can see I'm just flipping it the other third of the way. Got a really nice sear on all of them, and yeah, they're just looking very nice and beautiful. I was drooling at this point, couldn't wait to finish and eat them up. You could also really see clearly just how much fat is rendering out from the meatballs. This is a result of me using the fattier beef. Even if you use something like 80/20, you will still get a similar result like this, but it won't be quite as much fat and it'll be a little bit easier to clean up. At this point, I killed the heat and I just went and started scooting all of the meatballs off to one side. For what you'll see I'm going to do in a second, I just kind of would like to tilt the pan a bit to the side just to get majority of the fat sitting on the one side of the pan, and then I'll go ahead and take a couple of paper towels and soak up a lot of the extra fat that you just don't really want in your finished product. Now, you might have heard that fat is flavor and whatnot, so you might be asking, why are you wiping up all the fat? Why are you soaking it up, getting rid of it, if that's just going to add more flavor to your food? There is a degree of truth to that for sure, but at the same time, these meatballs are so fatty and it's not like they're fully cooked through yet. So there's plenty of fat on the inside that will render out during the simmering process with the sauce. As you can see, the meat I used was so fatty, I had to use 3 paper towels just to get the majority of the excess fat soaked up. Which, if you use something like 80/20 or 85/15, you might get away with just using one, maybe 2 paper towels, depending on how much you're making. At this point, I just went ahead and spread out the meatballs a little bit, and then you could just go ahead and add whatever sauce of your liking. And then I added probably about 64 ounces worth of sauce, maybe just under that, just because I didn't want to overload the pan. For this amount of meatballs, you probably would want slightly more sauce than what I had added, but what I like to do is I just like to add as much as will be used for now, maybe a little bit extra, and then when I have some remaining meatballs left, then I could just go ahead and add a little bit extra sauce and then maybe simmer it again if I want to. Once you're done with that, then you could just go ahead and set it on medium low, just to go ahead and start slowly simmering away. This will add some nice meaty flavor to the sauce as well. And then this is the perfect time to go ahead and get some water boiling for your pasta as well. I went and tried to find the biggest lid that I could, but as you can see, it just wasn't big enough for that pan with the sauce in it. And so I have a solution for that that you'll see a little bit later on. Once your water's boiling, you can go ahead and add a bit of salt as much as you desire, not too much though. And then I like to add a little bit of oil. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but for whatever reason, I find it helps keep the pasta from sticking to the pan and from sticking to itself also. You just want to go ahead and get all of the pasta submerged and then just follow the instructions on the package for the pasta. A lot of pastas will be different depending on what you get, depending on exactly what it's made of. And so I just went ahead and I cut off about a minute or two from the time to get al dente. As you'll see at the end, I'm going to make buttered noodles out of this. And make sure you come back every couple minutes or so at the very least and give it a stir. You don't want the pasta to be stuck together in a big clump or anything like that, just because then it's not going to be able to cook evenly. And you just want to make sure it's all nice and separated, just so that it's all nice and evenly cooked. Because the last thing you want is just a hard clump of spaghetti. I guess, unless you're into that. Now here you can see I finally found my solution for covering up the pan. I just grabbed a nice big piece of aluminum foil and just covered it, sealing it all around the edges. And now you still want a little bit of evaporation so the sauce isn't too watery. And so what I went and did is I just poked a few holes in the top, as you can see, just to allow for a little bit of evaporation. And it's really important to get this covered because as the sauce simmers, you don't want it plopping around, making a big mess all over your stove and your counter. At this point, the pasta was pretty much ready. I was just taking a little tester noodle out just to try it, make sure it was just a bit shy of al dente, exactly where I wanted it. And once I confirmed that, I went ahead and killed the heat and then grabbed a little mug just to scoop a little bit of that pasta water for later. As you'll see later, this stuff works magic. Now, before the pasta sits in the hot water too long and then gets overcooked, you want to go ahead and strain it as quick as possible, and then just go ahead and bring it back to the pot. And then at this point, you could go ahead and start working on the buttered noodles. So I started off with about 3 tablespoons of butter, and I just started working that in. This also helps to start cooling down the pasta a little bit, just to prevent it from overcooking in its own heat. And then I added back some of that pasta water, and then decided a little bit more pasta water, and then just started going on melting the butter. And the pasta water really helps to emulsify the butter and create a nice creamy sauce that just coats all of the pasta. And I just went and added some salt and pepper to taste. And you could add a little bit more, a little bit less if you want, depending on your taste or if you're on a certain diet. Now, as you can see here, as I'm trying to demonstrate, when I lift up all the spaghetti, all that water and butter I added, you can see there's nothing left on the bottom. That's just because it all emulsified into a nice, creamy, buttery sauce that's coating all of the noodles. And now for the big reveal, big steaming pan full of sauce. And you can see some of that fat that continued to render out of the meatballs. And then here I'm just grabbing a little bit of spaghetti and just making a little mound where I could set some meatballs on top. And now I made these meatballs so big that honestly one would suffice for the average person. But I like a little extra protein. Why not? So I went ahead and added two. And then just go ahead and top that off with a little bit of extra sauce as well. And honestly, this might be one of my favorite recipes so far that I've gotten from ChatGPT, as it really results in some delicious, super tender meatballs. You can see they break away with barely any pressure from the fork, given they are still super fresh and hot. But even after sitting for a while, they stay very nice and tender, and they're super juicy, flavorful, everything you could want out of a meatball. No off flavors like sometimes you can get when you get meatballs. And overall, I would have to say I got to give this recipe at least a 8.5 to 9 out of 10, especially for the average person. It's super easy to make. Takes maybe an hour, give or take a little bit, depending on how efficiently you put everything together. And this recipe was just a winner for everybody in my family. My pops enjoyed it, which typically he doesn't like this type of food. My little brother and my younger sister enjoyed it, and they typically don't enjoy meatballs either. And so I think that really says a lot. And I hope you guys give this recipe a try. I really think you guys will enjoy it. And I got some amazing content coming out soon. I have a spin off of the chocolate chip cookie recipe from ChatGPT that I got with some improvements that I think really take it a long way. And I also have a meal prep recipe as I'm going on a diet trying to lose some weight. So, yeah, got some really cool things coming soon. I hope you guys stay tuned, like, subscribe, comment to help the algorithm. Hope you guys have a blessed rest of your day and take care of yourselves.